Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 30. Can you believe we've done 30 episodes so far? And with each new episode, we get to chat with a nature journaler, experiencing the world in a unique way, sharing their thoughts and ideas and their process. I really like how we are all connected by our shared love of nature, and yet everyone has their own story to tell, their own way of experiencing and moving through this world. I feel so lucky to be part of this sharing of experiences and talking with amazing people each week. If you're enjoying the podcast and you'd like to support the project, you can do this on Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to choose a small donation to contribute, and that could be as little as $1 a month. It's totally up to you. And this helps cover the time and the financial costs that it takes to bring this podcast to you each week. You can go to patreon.com/journalingwithnature to learn more about it. Thank you to all the folks supporting the podcast there. Your help really makes this project possible. Today, my guest is Christiane Weismüller, who's from Frankfurt in Germany. Christiane expresses her creativity in a lot of different ways. She's an artist, photographer, writer, and poet, and within each of these artistic forms, her focus as subject is always nature. During our conversation, Christiane explains her creative process and the ways that each of these different art forms can be used to capture a different aspect of nature. Her work asks us to notice the simple things, the simple beauty that we can see and feel and experience when we pay gentle attention to our moments in nature. Christiane, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm very excited to chat with you.
I'm very happy to be here too, Beth, and thank you for this nice invitation.
I often start with my guests and I ask them about early nature experiences. Did you have nature in your childhood?
Yes, I was lucky to grow up with a large garden with some trees, old trees there. And due to the trees, we have squirrels and hedgehogs and rabbits and birds, woodpeckers, and the little wrens or kings of the fences, which I like to call it in English. I like to translate something from German to English and back. So, yes, this was very precious to me, and we have a little pond there, and so frogs and dragonflies came into the garden too. This was for me, yes, a very important part of my childhood. And when I think I was not in school yet, and I told my parents, okay, I want to have a rose and I want to have a field. And my parents were a bit astonished, but then surprised, but then they say, okay, this is your rose. And I love this kind of rose. These days it's kind of apricot, change its color from yellow to apricot to kind of pink. And the field thing was kind of difficult, but we have kind of part of the garden like a backyard with a very bad soil, the earth for gardening. And but I dig with my little shovel or something like that. And my mother gave me seeds of sunflowers and beans. And I hate beans to eat them. But this one I ate, and they don't they taste terribly, but tasted terribly. But I must admit, my whole family ate this terrible tasting beans and said, "Oh, what lovely, lovely!" And so, but I love this, and this love for gardening and trees and nature was continuing through my life. And when we were at the local library, I came out with a pile of books about nature and animals and plants and jungles and the oceans and all creatures, great and small.
Oh, that's such a sweet story about your mother giving you a rose and figuring out a way to give you the things that you wanted in the garden, the field, even though it had to be a backyard field. That's so sweet. And what do you see around you now where you are? What does nature look like in your home of Frankfurt, Germany?
Yes, I live in a quite big city here in Germany, in Frankfurt, and luckily I have not a big garden, but a little garden. It's more like a backyard with some parts for planting flowers. On the sides, I have no trees, but little ones in pots. So I have this. In my childhood, we have a very big maple tree, which I remember when my father planted it. It was as little than I. Mm-hmm. So I think I was 4 or 5, and he said, when it grows, you will soon see it from your window. I had my bedroom on the first floor, and that can't be, and it grows very fast. Wow. It grew very fast, and so here I have one in a pot, mm-hmm. a little Japanese maple, and some apple tree, very little one. And my flowers, and yes, there's also something to put water in it and put a little water lily in it. So that's my pond. Okay. And yes, that's what I see here around me. And we live. It's called the Green Belt of Frankfurt. So. We can go 5 minutes and then we are at a river and some little parks, and you can walk there. But there's always the noise from the motorway, and you have bridges for the trams and trains, and you hear the planes. Mm-hmm. So it's a very mixed area, but it's better than nothing.
I'm always fascinated by these areas that are natural or nature, but surrounded by city. You know, I haven't been there, but I'd love to go to Central Park, where there's this wild nature right in the city, or little parks that are surrounded by urbanness. And yeah, I think it's beautiful that these little pockets of nature can give respite from the city.
Yes, we need this very, very much. And we have this kind of low hills. You can tell it the Taunus, Vogelsberg, Odenwald, some kind of areas with forests, and so you can drive 20 minutes and you are there, and you can hike there. And that's very nice here in this area.
When did you get into nature journaling? How did your nature journaling journey begin?
I think it began in my childhood too, because I in this garden, and we had a little forest nearby too, and kind of little lake. I was always very I like to observe this plants and birds and nature, and I brought some nature finds home, and I collect the first flowers for my grandmother who lived with us since she died when I was 13. And so this was something I did for me and for her too, because she can't get out of her bed and in the garden and on the street and somewhere. And so I brought her things for her from outdoors. Yes, and I did it. I think most of us did it in this way, or many of us, and observing and noticing, but to call it like this and to do it on purpose is something new. And I turned to art several years ago, and because I would like to photograph and draw and paint nature, and I would like to write about nature, and there was never another topic which interested me to do something creative work on it. And so in this context, I did my Instagram account, I think since 2015, yes, starting with my nature photography, and I did courses and workshops with people. And then I came across last year, I searched for books about drawing plants and something like that, and I searched for English and American books, because German books are not so, instruction books like that are not so very good. And I came across John Muir-Laws and this book, Nature Journal, Drawing Nature and Journaling. And this journaling thing I completely overlooked at the first time. But then when I got the book, I saw this and I thought, oh, this is something which I would like to do, and which I unconsciously, when you like to call it so, I like to do this. And I often write something down when I go out, and write some observations down. And so I can do it in one journal, and that I liked it. So last year I started my nature journaling and posted it on Instagram, and then I started a nature journaling blog on my website. Yes.
That's wonderful. I think that book in particular starts a lot of people off. I think it's such a good beginning,
Yes,
a doorway into everything to do with nature journaling. And you're a creative person in many, many different fields. You have different ways of capturing nature in your work. You use your nature journal, but you also use photography and painting and writing, each capturing something about nature. Each form is different from the others. I'd love to know more about your view on how different creative forms are able to capture unique aspects of nature. Like photography can capture one thing and poetry can capture something else.
Yes, that's a good question. I started with photography because my father gave me, when I was, I think, 15, a camera as a present. And that was something which I did very long, but not in a professional way, because I decided first to study literature and linguistics, and this biological interest, which I had too, was at university. I was not very satisfied, because I thought, oh, you would be working in a laboratory and not outdoors. So I concentrate on this literature and writing thing, and I painted several years after the death of my grandmother. I started to paint for 10 years, and then I had to give it up because of my studies and other things. But it came back in the last 6-7 years, I think. And so I would, with photography, I do something. Most of them are not realistic pictures, but I work with intentional camera movement. And so there are kind of blurred pictures, because I like to emphasize the atmosphere, which was important for me in that moment when I was out in the woods or at the seashore or something like that. And other pictures, I did it with macro lenses, and that's also something which you can't see with your eyes. So it's also a special aspect of nature you can show, and also to work with the camera in different kinds of focus.
Yes.
So you always have another part of a plant in focus, and then you change the lens, and then you have another part of the plant in focus. And I think that so you can show something else. And in painting and drawing, yes, you can put things together from different parts.
Yes.
Okay, you can do it with photography when you cut something out and put it together with Photoshop or something like that. You can do this too. But I love to do this work outside and not so much on the computer. So that's not my kind of work. So I did this part with watercolor and inks. And I love this play of water and colors and different paper. And often I paint with feathers or blades of grass or twigs or something like that. So I would like to paint with nature materials, and for me, this water and color thing creates some kind of organic elements and things to capture something, perhaps not these things you can see, but some inner structure of it. And writing is also something when you cannot draw something, or it's good for express some kind of emotions and reflections. And lately I did some kind of series of photographs in the woods where the sun comes through the trees, and there were always water drops everywhere, and they glittered and glistened and something like that. And I wrote something about it, but not what you see there. So it's not that's the text and the illustrates the picture, or the other way round, but it's another stage to connect with nature. And that is kind of fascination for me in this nature journaling thing. You have these drawings, then you can write something. Okay, photograph, perhaps you can put a photograph on it. So, but this picture and writing combination, I think it gives a nice whole picture of or impression of what you experienced in nature.
Yes, I was giving a workshop today, in fact, and I was explaining that we use words, pictures, and numbers. And I can say we use words, pictures, and numbers to get a full, vibrant nature journal page that encapsulates all that we see, hear, and feel. but it's not until you're doing it that it makes sense. So I was talking to them about tuning into their senses and what can you see? And it's easy to paint what you see. What do you hear? That's a little bit more tricky to paint. We talked about notating bird sounds, or how can you use marks to illustrate a bird sound? And then what do you smell? That's really hard to express. And so then it became a practical exercise. I said, so write it, that's when you can use these different ways of doing something that's not tangible, not something you can see. So write it, and that's where it becomes useful. So you are influenced by Japanese aesthetic concepts like white space, minimalism, wabi-sabi, and haiku, and I'm really interested in these. Can you tell me what draws you to these concepts and how do they influence your work?
Yes, so we came back to my grandmother again. When she died, I had this her belongings. I was 13, and there were many books, and so I said, I will look through the books and put it in our bookshelves. And there I got this little small book of haiku, writing in German translation, of course. And it was there was coffee marks on it, and so I thought, okay, it is often a read book, and I was very sorry that I can't ask my grandmother about this.
Yeah.
So, and I instantly fell in love with this little poems, and at the age of 12, I started to write, like most of little girls. I write diary, and I started to write poems with the help of my grandmother. And so then I started to write haikus. And yes, and this Japanese thing in photography, I came across it. I teach workshops on wabi-sabi in photography, how to capture the little things on your paths which you often overlook. And in painting, I like this, this paper, this white paper, this empty space, which is not a dead space, but a space of possibilities, and a space which is connected with the other space, which contains something. And these ideas I like very much. And I did, I think, 7 years, for 7 years now, I did haiku workshops and work with people, and in some sequences we go out and write, or at least note some things we observe in nature, and then write our haikus down.
When you're writing poetry, do you write them in nature, or is it something that you reflect on mostly internally and then write at home?
Sometimes I have this little book and note some, not poetry, but observations. And I would like to recommend this to do when you go out and are interested in writing poetry or for your nature journaling, only to write some fragments. It don't have to be a whole sentence or word. Perhaps the other day we are freezing here in Germany, but now the weather is changing, and yesterday 2 crows were sitting close together up in a tree against a blue sky, and so I would write 2 crows sitting together, and then a kind of line sticks to my ear, and this experience in the wood with this rain and the sun I had a line. It's all about water and light. And I don't know whether what to do with it, but it was in my mind. And some other day I sit down and play with this and explore some kind of writing with this. And so when you are nature journaling, I think this very little observations are a good starting point to write something. And we can use the prompts, Jack's prompts. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of to write kind of a little poem or haiku. There are 3 lines, 3 prompts. It fits very well, I think, together. And it's not so much time. Sometimes I wrote it at home because was not the time. But I think this little, really little poems, 3 lines, up to 5 lines perhaps, you can write it outside too.
That's really good advice, to take a little notebook and just capture something like the 2 crows sitting side by side. You don't have to write a lot, but even writing that 1 line or those 2 sentences, that can capture something that will, like you say, go round in your mind until it forms into something else. I wonder if you'd read a poem for us.
Yes, I would love to. Yes, it's about nature. What a surprise. Little golden leaves floating on the lake, like a gentle breath of autumn. Stillness waiting. The silver swan knows the right time to make the next move. I'm waiting for the circles in the water dissolving. But they never do, even when a new movement produces new circles. Nothing is lost in time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
This is something which this moment I remembered. It's 10 years old, this poem, but I clearly remember this experience when I was at this little pond, lake, whatever you think it was. It bring it back to me, and I think that's the same kind of experience when you draw something. And the haiku thing, this I had one for the new year, because it's a nice tradition in Japan to write haikus on postcards and send it to your friends. So we wrote Christmas cards, and they write new cards for the new year. And so I wrote something: first days of the year, waiting for the unknown now, misty midwinter. And then when we have snow, after I think 10 years, we have not so much snow now. Black and white lines on a white sheet, winter calligraphy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's so great. I love how it's just like they say, like a word photograph, like a snapshot of one moment, one beautiful little thing that you've noticed in nature.
Yes, you it's kind of zooming in.
Yes.
On something, and often in the third line you have a kind of broader perspective. So there's a change or something about your response to this haiku moment. And so you can say very much in this 3 little lines.
Yes.
And that's kind of fascinating me.
Yeah, that's why it's really powerful. The simplicity, there's power in the simplicity. You have this thing that you do, which is you call haiku drawings. And it's a similar thing. It's very simple. You often use, like you said, natural materials like twigs of grass or natural inks. Can you tell me a little bit more about your haiku drawings?
Yes, this are drawings, as you said, with these natural materials on a very, very smooth paper. And so the ink can flow very well. And yes, I thought about it. What would I draw or paint when I paint a haiku? To write it, okay, you can say there are two impressions, two things you see out there, and they come together, and it's a kind of special moment. So I draw something I saw in very early spring. I saw bare and black trees, but on the fields they came the green seed. It came out, and that was kind of contrast. And so I did this together in one image. So that's what haiku drawing is for me. Or leaves which fall from the trees, which dances along, and water which flows under it. And I did it with only several lines.
This again, it's the simplicity that makes it beautiful.
And I use not colored inks, but this Japanese black ink, or sepia, or walnut ink I discovered recently, and there are interesting and beautiful shades of bronze.
I haven't done it before, but I love the idea of using found objects from nature as your brush to create.
Yes, it's fun. It's very
nature drawing.
And you get when you draw with a trick and you draw a kind of tree, you have automatically this rough structure.
Yes.
It corresponds very, very good with each other.
I'm going to try that. And I feel like you also get some sort of inner connection as well, because your fingers are touching the bark of the twig, and you're connecting with nature with an extra dimension. You mentioned on your website that one of the aims of your work is to draw attention to the beauty and importance and vulnerability of nature, and to awaken the desire to protect nature. And I'm wondering what do you think is the relationship between a connection with nature through art and nature journaling and photography, and something bigger, a desire and motivation to act in environmentally responsible ways?
Yes, that's a topic which about I thought very much, because with this returning to art, I was more returning to nature too, and this nature journaling was something like the what do you call it, the top of it, because now I can go out with people. And I did this biological study, but I always read books about nature, and I observed, and I know pretty much about things, and I show them, and I can show them something and explain, and we can draw and write. And so eventually I came back to this idea, I will go out and do something in nature. And this is something I'm very, very happy about it. And in April, I will do my first nature journaling workshop in Germany. I'm very curious whether it will take place, whether people will come and do it. And I think, okay, but I would like to do some kind of or other way around. How can I communicate this fragility of nature and desire to protect? how can I motivate people? I try to explore on which way I can do this. In my childhood, Jean-Jacques Cousteau was very popular, and he said, you protect things you love, and they are kind of dynasty in this family. And the son said, you will protect things you know something about. And now the other one said, you love it when you learn about it, or something like that.
Yes. Yes, it's true.
And that, I think it's true. And I think art is a good way to communicate with people through their feelings.
Yes,
and not so much with the mind. So now I read very much about environmental communication, environmental psychology, and such things. And in my years when I started to study, and in Germany, there was not such kind of field where you can do this. I know that you are an environmental educator. Perhaps you have more experience in this, how to communicate this need to protect nature. I think it's about this thing of beauty and of wonder is a very important aspect. So I try to do it.
When I studied environmental education at university, I learned a bunch of stuff through my master's program, but the thing that I took away, the thing that stuck itself in my mind most, was that idea that you can't get someone to change their behavior by telling them to, or telling them a list of facts or reasons why. You have to move them. You have to move them emotionally. And it can be because they've seen firsthand the negative impact of their behavior, or it can be experiencing joy or surprise. Anything that gives it an emotional reaction is going to settle deeply into someone's heart, into someone's life, and that's what motivates people. That's what makes them change their behavior.
Yes, I started this year. I started a training with the largest environmental organization here in Germany, the NABU, and then you are a nature guide or something, and we develop there kind of how to guide people through the environment, or how to show them things and to explain. And I think I could get there some inspiration for this, and for my own workshops and courses, and what I can do with it. I started a blog this year, second blog on my website, because I'm very attached to the sea, art for the 7 seas. And there I like to, motivate people to protect the oceans, our oceans, the North Sea or the Baltic Sea, but also the Pacific, the Atlantic, and all around the world.
Thank you so much for being with me here on the podcast today. It's been so good to chat to you about your work, about poetry and the heart, and I loved hearing especially about your grandma and your connection there, and how she encouraged you, and this beautiful gift she gave you without knowing, which was the little book of haiku that she obviously loved. Thank you so much for sharing your stories today.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you for having me in this podcast. I liked it very much to chat with you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Christiane. I find her work and the way she speaks about nature to be full of tenderness and care. One of the most touching things in this conversation for me was how her nature journal journey began when she was a young girl, bringing nature treasures from outdoors to her grandmother, who couldn't go outdoors for herself. This reminded me of John Muir-Laws's definition of love being sustained, compassionate attention. In those moments, Christiane was giving sustained, compassionate attention both to her grandmother and to nature. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.